This is the program where we spend time looking at issues that leaders have to deal with, and we have conversations about best practices for leaders and bring guests on like we have today. Very excited about today's guest, who we'll talk about in a moment. Actually, going to bring her on in a moment. We're not going to waste a whole lot of time here before we do that. But we bring guests to talk about different aspects of leadership, and today I'm really, really excited to talk about the feminine. Both my guests and I really believe that organizations in particular need more of the feminine. And we're going to talk about what that means, at least from my guest's perspective and from mine as well. And hopefully those of you who show up for the live show and make some comments and ask some questions, please do that in the comment section below, and we'll be able to take care of your comments and answer your questions as well. And I think what's really cool about this show, at least for me, is that we can explore any different aspect of leadership that's on your mind, things that you might be struggling with, issues that you might be having around leadership. If you're an aspiring leader and you're not there yet, maybe you have some questions about how to get there or what to do when you get there. So we can help you with all those different kinds of aspects of leadership. This show is brought to you by my company, Foothills Youth and Family Services Incorporated. And it's definitely designed to be an interactive show. It's not, we don't want to just sit here and talk at you for an hour or so. So we definitely want to have you ask some questions and make some comments. That would be fantastic if you did that. If you are here, let us know where you're from, where you're coming from, where you're tuning in from. That would be really great as well. I'm broadcasting from High River, Alberta in Canada. And High River is a small town of about 15,000 people, about 40 minutes south of Calgary, Alberta. And it's a kind of a rainy, gloomy morning. It's 10 o'clock in the morning here. So I hope wherever you are, maybe there's a little bit more sun shining and you're enjoying some warm weather and also taking care of yourself in this crazy time. Well, I think we're going to get right into our topic. So we're talking about the feminine today. We're talking about having more of the feminine in organizations. And so we're going to look at questions like, well, what actually is the feminine? And why should we have more of the feminine in organizations? And what does that mean for men? I'm one of them. What does that mean for me? Is that going to be good for me, bad for me, indifferent for me? So I'm very excited. I'm going to have to put my earphones in so I can hear this woman. I'm very excited to introduce my guest. And her name is Riesah Prock. And I've known Riesah for quite a long time now, about 15 years. And in fact, she's right upstairs, also broadcasting from High River. So I wonder why that is. She just happened to be in my house. Riesah and I are married. And not only are we married, but we definitely share certain things in terms of our work together. And I'm just going to bring her on, and I'm going to let her actually introduce herself to you and tell you what she does. Hey, there you are. Riesah, how are
you? Of life in the way of women's cycles, in the way of women bearing children, in the way of bringing life to the fields, everything that grew, all of nature, space, the planets, the universe, in fact, was all considered to be of feminine essence for the longest time. And in those days, though women knew what made children, men did not. And they envied the power of life force that women held, both from the bleeding every month, excuse me, and also the bearing of children, the bearing of life. And for many years, men did not know they had any part in creation. And the women were the leaders in the community. And when their cycle came, they would gather together in the dream house and spend the days dreaming and getting messages and coming forth into the community and sharing those dreams with the community, leading them forward. Well, when men started to figure out, well, there's got to be something we can do, they began to they began to cut their penis, scarify their bodies, create blood flow to imitate the cycle of women.
Interesting.
And over time, they began to usurp the power of the feminine, changing it, literally turning it upside down and putting the male, masculine, on the top, and the feminine, as ever, on the bottom. In doing that, this came from not only envy and jealousy, but great fear, because men felt their life was uncertain. Does this sound familiar, ladies?
So can I just interrupt there just for a sec, Riesah?
Yes.
Why do you think men felt that way? That they felt their life was uncertain?
Because they didn't have any power.
Okay.
Or not enough, shall we say.
Certainly
I'm sure they
not
had things to do.
certainly not what the women were showing in terms of their power.
Right.
Okay.
Not in an equal way, perhaps. But the women were, I mean, it wasn't like men were just these little dogs. It wasn't anything like that.
Right.
The men were the hunters, the gatherers, the providers, and the protectors.
And we watch cartoons on Saturdays, right?
Yeah. And so over time, what has come to be known as a patriarchy was created through the masculine structures and forms, the quietening down of that wild feminine energy unleashed, like on the ocean when there's a great tempest, when the wind was blowing very hard or rain was coming down, pelting. All of that was known to be from the feminine. So what has happened is that this all came to men and they said, we have nothing to do with this. And the women have been doing this and we have to control it. And control became a major factor in the relationship between the masculine and feminine, certainly over the last 10, 15,000 years, predominantly. And the patriarchy, as it's come to be known, the right angles instead of the circle, the square box instead of the spiral. Things were no longer round. Eventually, time became changed into a more structured 12-month effect in the time of, forgotten his name now, but in the creating of the Julian calendar. But before that, it was always 13 moons. 13 moons. And it still is, even though we count them into 12.
Any idea why they changed it to 12?
Oh, sure. We're talking about the Catholic Church.
Ah, okay.
Need I say more?
That'll be a topic for another show.
That'll be another time. And so what has happened is women, in order to be able to feel safe, to coexist with men, because they were the bearer of life and they had the children, what they did is they reduced themselves into what became known as a tiny little pill. You know that story about the pill? The pill has many different, many different perceptions. The jagged little pill, the little pill we take to prevent ourselves from having children, and so on. We compressed ourselves. We took all that we were and put ourselves into a tiny little pill so we could be digested in the minds and bodies of men. And the boxes they put us into in order to control us, in order to control the unbelievable power of the feminine that they feared and still do, put us into boxes, square boxes, no round, moving the energy round and round, always in the square box. And nowadays, even men are starting to rebel against the box. They're uncomfortable with that because they recognize they put themselves in there too. And as I'm speaking about the masculine and feminine, what I want to say is there's no blame. The masculine and feminine were inculcated with this patriarchal rulemaking that's been passed down year upon year. It originated with tribal conditioning. The understanding that even if a person had a brilliant idea in the community, they must conform in order to save the whole group.
Hmm.
They couldn't do something that would put them all in danger with some idea that would take them out of the safety zone. So everything has been brought in to very small viewing experience. And of course, where nature is concerned, also the feminine expression of life force that we see all around us in abundance, that too had to be controlled, and not only controlled, but owned.
Hmm.
And that is why we're experiencing this terrible destruction of the planet, all the resources being dug out of the ground, and so on. Now, what does that all have to do with the feminine in organizations? Well, what I've given you is a model that we've been living with, that's been passed down year upon year, how the feminine is meant to be quiet. I remember as a child being told, girls are meant to be seen and not heard.
Hmm.
I had many ideas. I was born empathic and very intuitive. And even my family, who had those similar qualities among them, did everything to protect me and shut me down in case I put myself in danger. And for many years, that's how I lived, through my intellect instead of my intuition and my heart.
Hmm.
So
Of course,
you can imagine.
you're not saying, and I know you're not saying this, but I just want to make it clear for people who might be listening that men don't have intuition.
No,
We certainly do, right? So,
yes,
okay, is there a
yes, men
difference?
have
Do you see a
intuition.
difference between the two, between masculine and feminine intuition?
Well, for example, I know you have intuition. I've witnessed it.
It was that
Uh,
Tuesday, right? About 6 years
yeah,
ago.
just about. I don't know how you use your intuition, but I know that mine comes and started to come in very powerfully after a near death experience when I was 40 and has never gone away. She stayed with me all my life since. And so I get inklings of things. I get ideas that are unique that I don't hear anyone else talking about or contemplating when I ask them. Um, I have experiences of awareness, like I can see things coming down the road. Um, I can feel them. I can sense them. The information comes in a variety of different ways through my senses and through my being. Just like this message came in while I was lying in bed the other morning, asking for vision. I have developed a very close relationship with Source
Hmm.
to help me. I've been working with co-creatively and how do I say co-creatively with Spirit in my work for many years, many years. And so we are already always talking to each other. It isn't like I just open it up and then it just starts. Well, sometimes it does now because I've created that relationship.
Right.
And women have these things, and men do too. We have these qualities, but because of the way we're raised and taught by authority figures, our parents, our teachers, people in the church, mostly men, um, typically in structural ways that keep reproducing the same way of being in us. such that if we were to veer off the path, we have children in the room who are considered to be disruptive. Well, you're looking at someone who is also. From my very
I
early
can vouch
years,
for that.
yeah, my teacher used to say, "You ask so many questions." I asked so many questions from the time I went to school, beginning years in grade 1. And the way my teacher kept me quiet was I got my work done at school so she could let me go and read in the corner by myself. And that way I didn't disrupt the class. In other cases, I had a teacher further on who put me next to the slow kids to poke them when they weren't going fast enough. That was terrible. So you see, this is how some people, and I must say a good number of them, react to creative children, creative people. And in my working life, I experience the same thing.
So just before you get, I'd want to talk to you about some of the, excuse me, some of the things that occurred for you in your working life with respect to the patriarchy. But just before we do that, I want to welcome anybody else who's maybe shown up either live or if you're just tuning into the video that's going to be replayed after this. Welcome. This is Herky Cutler. I'm your host, and we're at the Leadership 2020 series, where we explore a variety of different aspects of leadership. And today we're very excited to have the beautiful and lovely Riesah Prock, who is my wife, as well as many other things, to share with us her knowledge and experience of the feminine, and not just in terms of the big picture of the feminine and what the feminine means to society, but also how it relates to organizational culture. Because leaders need to be aware of this, and if they're not already, they should be. And the title of this show, this episode was, we need more feminine in organizations, and it's as simple as that for someone like me and Riesah and many other people, I'm sure. But the question that I run into, and I hope Riesah will answer this later on, is men, particularly men, saying, well, why, and what does that mean, and what does that mean for the men in the organization? Does that mean that we only have to hire women? It's not about gender, and I'm sure Riesah will touch on that. It's about much more than that. So welcome, everybody. If you have any questions or comments, please put them down in there, and we'll get Riesah to answer them for you for sure. So now back to you, Riesah. So would you like to share something about your professional life where you experienced the patriarchy and how that affected you?
Okay. Well, I've always been the kind of person who takes ownership of what I do. That's been my way since I was a child. So when I went to work in the man's world that it was, even more so than it is today, and doing jobs, I was intelligent, so I did my work very quickly, and I loved challenge, so I would look for more things to do, and I would go to my boss and say, could you give me something else to do? I've already mastered this. I'll continue doing this. Could I have some more? And in some cases, they gave me more, but it didn't take me very long. I was still a very young woman, and I realized that I'd hit the ceiling. And that was before they even named the glass ceiling. I was already talking like I was Alice in Wonderland in the house that was too small for me. And my head was bumping on the ceiling all the time. So I had a history of changing my jobs, because once the challenges ended and the pay didn't go up, despite all my talent, I followed the money. Some people commented on my work history and asked me when I was going to settle down. They wanted me, excuse me, to settle down somewhere and stay put. And, that's what we were taught to do. People were still getting the gold watch after 25 years of service. Well, I was ahead of my time. And I was already moving much faster than the times were. So when I got jobs where I could come in and present ideas finally, when I was working in the world of sales and marketing, and I could control my hours and how much money I made by what I did, then I could have the money I wanted for my earnings, do it in the time that I wanted to do it, and still have time to take care of my children because I was a single mother later on. And in addition to that, I'd come with my ideas. And I remember my bosses saying to me, one boss particularly saying to me, I'm going to reduce your base salary. You've just put your house up for sale, and you're going to have enough money to take care of yourself and still work for us. And I said, I never heard you offer me a piece of the company or make me an owner with you. I couldn't believe that he said that to me. To imagine, I'm sure he would never have said that to a man. But it happened in that time that I sold hardware and software, and I was testing the equipment to make sure that the software this company had would work. And that software actually was used to hire people into their company to see if they would fit in the company environment. So he said, would you like to test it? And I said, sure. Well, he came back with my results and he said, you are in the top 2%. You're the type of employee that everyone should hold on to and give you great salary and lots of opportunities. What happened is that never occurred. And in fact, what would happen is the great ideas that I had offered to my companies, they would take on after I left. And I'd learn about it later. They
Wow.
would not give me credit for what I brought, for my creativity. They would not give me the authority of my own decisions. That's what I was looking for. And so working in sales was like I was self-employed. And so I became self-employed for the rest of my life because I learned that was the only way I could make my own choices and manage my life accordingly.
Wow. So you're just to clarify, Riesah. So you were feeling. By the way, Paula's here. She says hi to you.
Hi, Paula.
So just to clarify, Riesah. So you're saying that you felt that the reason why you couldn't get ahead in these companies was because you were a woman, and they were
Yes.
whatever afraid of what you might do, or didn't think you had the ability to do it because you were a woman, or any and more of those reasons. Is that correct?
Well, they saw me as competition.
Okay.
They were worried that I might take their job. And perhaps I might have, but that wasn't my aim. My aim was to contribute, to make the situation better, to earn the company more money. But it was never seen that way. Instead, I was viewed as someone who was competing, and I was indeed competing in a man's world with mostly men and standing at the top of the sales force.
So
So
how
I
did
mean,
it
I
make you
had the
feel?
credibility.
How did it make you feel? What was going on inside of you
Mm.
in terms of, I mean, some people might be crushed by something like that, and they might leave and do something completely different and just give up. So how did it make you feel? And well, I'm asking you two questions, which I shouldn't, but how did it make you feel? And what drove you to keep going?
Well, I was very frustrated. I felt stymied. And because I had children to take care of and provide for, I was mother and father, both. When I made my choices to leave, it was always very well thought out. I was always raising myself up professionally by taking courses and trainings that improved my skills and grew my skills and my knowledge and my knowledge of self. Because I came to realize that everything comes from the inside, not from the outside, and that's where the influence is, inside of you.
Right.
If you know yourself and you know what you're capable of, you can create it out there. And that was something I started to do. I started taking courses and I became a teacher of those courses because I found them so valuable, and others did too. But in addition to that, when I worked for other companies, I had my own business going on the side. I started healing work early on, and I ran that business simultaneously. It never competed one with the other, but that's where I got my joy from. The other gave me the money and the security in my work. But ultimately, I tried to talk with my bosses. I tried to speak to people and learn what their motivation was. And what I discovered is that many men who are running companies really didn't know what they wanted. They were following the pattern they'd been given and they swallowed it whole. And here they were in the next generation doing what their parents had done or father had done. Um, and as a woman, I was expected, excuse me, I was expected to do the same thing as my mother had done: stay home, take care of the kids, be in the kitchen, look after my man. Well, I would have loved to have done that, but I couldn't find a man who could partner with me because I was stronger than they were. And of course, when you're working in a man's world, a lot of women have done this, and I did it. I took on a shell of the masculine. I learned to be a man in a man's world. And I can say I can be a better man than a lot of men still. And I don't say it because I'm proud of it, but I can say I know how it is. I know how it feels. I know how constraining it can be.
Yeah.
And so when I went looking for a new partner, my intention was always to find a man who knew his masculine self and could spark that masculine and that feminine in me. Because the first cosmic law is everything is born of the feminine and sparked by the masculine. Let's face it, I haven't said this yet, but we all have the masculine and the feminine within us. We all have an essence that may show up more masculine or more feminine, but we can go either way. There are lots of women who've lived on their own, go out and chop wood, carry water, and shoot a bear if they have to.
Of course.
I mean, it's not hard to do, but you do it because you must. It may be hard to do, but you learn. We learn. We are adaptable. That's what humans are. And what's happened is the patriarchy has stopped that. So much of our creativity has been dumbed down. So we think that technology is going to save us, another masculine construct. It isn't. We have to bring the feminine back into our life and allow the feminine to be the creative force that it is in all of us. And that means listening to each other, sharing with each other, being kind and respectful with each other, even and especially when we don't have the same kind of thinking. When our natural instinct is to butt heads or try to be right over someone else, take over. This is what the masculine's been taught to do. Power comes from control. It doesn't work. It's not working. It hasn't worked for a long time. And we have to accept that because change is what we are experiencing at maximum speed these days. We may have said, okay, things are changing. Well, females, feminine people, whether you're masculine with a feminine essence or not, you know that change is going on all the time. And because of that, because of the cycles and how we go with the cycles in our own body, we know it better than the masculine essence person does. That's not saying we're better or you're not good enough. It just means we have different ways of being in the world, and they both have their benefits and their drawbacks. Knowing ourselves helps us to bring out the best of who we are and to work with it and to manage ourselves in ways that make us better when we're triggered by other people's stuff.
Okay.
I can say, I go ahead.
I want to stop you there for a second so people can digest that. I also want to welcome anybody else who might have just tuned in either live. And if you're watching the video replay of this, you can also make comments, and we'll make sure that we'll get alerted to those comments, and we'll make sure to answer those comments if you have any questions for Riesah. We're talking with Riesah Prock here on Leadership 2020, and we're talking about the feminine, and we're going to zoom in a little bit more about the feminine in organizations and why we think leaders need to use or practice more feminine kinds of ways to deal with their staff and their customers. And I'm going to ask Riesah to talk about why she thinks that should be so. Riesah, Debbie said she had to run. So, and she said, I have to run. It was great to see you, Riesah Prock, and thanks for all your beautiful wisdom. That's from Debbie. So if anybody else is out there and they have any comments or questions, here's one actually from Paula. Maybe we can deal with this now, Riesah, if that's okay. So Paula says, I was curious about that fitting in with the boys. Did your male coworkers treat you like you were one of them, or did you experience something different?
Well, let's put it
Good
this
question.
way. Thanks for the question, Paula. Let's put it this way. I could hang out with the boys, but I was also a parent parenting children, and I had to get home. So, no, I didn't go out with the boys to the bars. But at work, I was recognized as having many skills and awareness sometimes, certainly from some of the boys. And I was able to share some things with them. I mean, I'm generous hearted. When I saw someone struggling, I would offer if there's something I could help them with, because I thought it was important for us to work together. And I would come to them if I needed help too. We have to collaborate if we're going to get along. And it's in our nature to do that anyway. But the way things are set up, as I say, with these structures that are so rigid, the lines get drawn and you don't dare step over the line. So when I expressed myself to my boss, quite frankly, when we would have a sales meeting, he didn't like it. You know, he was defensive. But I brought forth things that I noticed about how we were being treated, and I felt that needed to be altered to serve everybody. And I wasn't just speaking for myself, but also, I mean, I have to say, I challenged people. I still do.
Really?
Yes, it is. Because I want to wake them up. I want people to wake up. And so I would say things sometimes, not to hurt people, but to challenge them, to think a different way, to consider other options that I could see. Everywhere I looked, I could see opportunities. I still do, even in this time of the virus, and recognize that there are so many opportunities and possibilities available to us if we want to look. But it means you have to be woke if you're going to get that. So, you know, wake up, folks. So
Thanks.
I may not have been the most, you know, they may not have seen me as a wonderful addition. But, you know, when you produce a lot of sales in your company, that gives jobs to everybody, not just to you. So I was contributing in my way.
Excellent. Thanks again for the question, Paula. So, Riesah, let's hone in a little bit more on the organization itself. So, you run your own business, so you're not necessarily involved in an organization, but like everybody else on this planet, you use them, you shop at them, you're involved in all kinds of organizations, as we all are, both in terms of buying goods and services, but also in volunteering and moving in and out of them. What are you seeing? What's your experience in terms of the patriarchy? Is it still thriving? Is it still mostly a male-oriented world in terms of the business world? What are you seeing out there?
Well, if we look around, we can see before us, on the larger picture, the breaking down of many, many organizations, governments, many structures are falling down. They're failing us. They can't meet the need. And that's why I say this virus has given us so much opportunity. But as you can see in the Alberta government today, the leadership there is trying to go back to the dark ages in so many different ways and leading backwards, wanting to create coal mining again, um, challenging doctors when we need them in this time, and teachers and nurses, unions, and so on. And these unions, particularly teachers and nurses, are all women for the
Right.
most part. So when you look at that as an example, women have been in those unions, people have been demonstrating. The government's trying to shut down the possibility, the right to go out and demonstrate when you don't agree with the rules and regulations the government is putting forth and express how you feel about it. That is going backwards, and it's going to fail. This government is going to fail royally, and it is already. But you can see it everywhere in the world. It's not just in this province, but it's everywhere. Um, what other example can I give you? Well, women want to work. Women, 50 and plus percent of the population in this world want to work. You can't keep women at home anymore caring for the children. But that is what women are being forced to do because the government will not give them the one thing they need, which is proper child care
Childcare.
services to allow them to safely put their children into care during the day so they can go out and work and contribute to the family. The result is there's this constant, I mean, this thing about childcare has been going on for years, 15 or more years as I clock it, maybe even more than that. And that is a result of the patriarchy fighting the very thing that they need in order to make this economy thrive. We need women. Their creativity, their contribution is enormous, and they're being stymied by this overarching patriarchal way from the government who claims they just can't do it. I mean, the previous government in this province was doing it fine, and lots of women were working and making money. Now, because of what's happened, the breakdown, women have gone back home because they're the default caregivers. They're the ones who take care of the elderly, the children, and so on. And they're being forced back into that tunnel again, that box. It doesn't work. And of course, what I want to say in process theory, breakdown is the beginning of breakthrough. Now, I can't say the breakthrough is going to come right away because the entrenchment of patriarchal ways and structures is very deep and wide. And we've been with them for so long. We can't even recognize them. That's something I want to teach women and men to recognize the structures that you don't even know why you're not feeling good in them, but you need to make change and you don't know where to go. And I have found ways to help people do that. Of course, the virus shut everything down and I couldn't go out and speak about it. But I will make videos about this because I think it's so important. And the thing is, the result will be with the breakdown. What we're given in this opportunity of the breakdown is to shine ourselves up, to polish up those places in ourself that is a little dark. The places we shoved our feelings and past into the basement and chose not to deal with. This is the time when we have to spend time taking care of ourselves. And when we do that, the organizations we work with will benefit enormously. This is for men and women. Now, in organizations, the feminine looks at things from a very different way. We look at relationship. We create relationship. Look at the countries where the COVID virus was almost nil. Iceland, New Zealand, 2 of many, run
Taiwan,
by women.
Norway,
Women
Sweden.
in yes, and women in the cabinet too, running the different departments of the government. That is where a perfect example of how the feminine can make a difference to the life of people. We don't have to go far to look. They're all around us. We just have to enact those changes. We have to open up the ability for people to vote and to express themselves and to create. Expression is essential for creativity. If you shut women down, you're going to shut down the possibilities for the greater good. And it's a big mistake. And I say this to Jason Kenney particularly.
We'll make sure he gets that message.
I hope so.
Yeah, that was inspiring, Riesah. You know, it's funny you mentioned about the daycare. Not funny. It's some of the examples you mentioned about women leaders. Scandinavia, some of the Scandinavian countries have never had an issue around childcare because they realized that was so important. And they either I don't have the facts in front of me, but they either have free or very reasonably priced childcare, so that women can go out in the work, and they've been in the workforce, you know, for forever. So it can be done.
Yes.
It's a matter of intention. And just as you mentioned, those female leaders during the pandemic, they're, from what I've read, the main intention, their main focus was their people, caring about their
Absolutely.
people and having them be safe. And that trumped, I use that word, that trumped the economy and anything else. That was those are all important things, but it was really taking care of the people, and that's why they did so well.
Yes, it was priority and focus. And I
Yes,
might add just one quick thing. For
sure.
example, in Denmark, elderly people are integrated into their society and taken care of in very beautiful ways, integrated into life around them. They're not just put in a home and shut away as we have in the North American model. So that's another thing. That's a very important thing, because when the elderly are cared for in a very benign way, everybody benefits. I mean, the wisdom is still there and can be utilized. And some places the children are going to school together with elderly people there they spend time with. It's a wonderful collaboration. It's important. We can't push people away in the dark like that.
It's definitely a different mindset, isn't it?
It
By the
is.
way, Paula, thanks you very much for your answer. Paula, just so you know, Reese is on Skype, so she can't see the screen
Mm-hmm.
that you're seeing. So thanks again for the question. So Risa, we still have some time left. Where do you want to go with this? One of the things that I think I'd like to address is men. So if there are men listening to this now or watching it on the replay and are taking some kind of offense to it, and you know how people are. Some people will take offense, some people will not. What do you think might be going on for them? I know you can't speak for them, but what's your experience?
Well, I want to say to men that I love men. I have two
Glad
sons.
to hear that.
I'm married to a man. But what I want to say is um, about men, men need men, just like women need women. Um, and it's men that make men a man, just like women make women a really good woman. And there's nothing to fear except fear itself. And that comes from our old conditioning, the tribal conditioning. Um, and certainly for men, especially, I would say, learning to deal with uncertainty, to profound change, rapid change, is something that I think men need to cultivate in themselves. And I know Herky's member of MDI, and they do a lot of things that bring that out, that help men to find their strength in ways that come from inside themselves. Don't look outside for the certainty. It never was there. In this time and all time, change has been the predominating factor. People try to eliminate it, try to avoid it, deny it, just like they're denying climate change. It's inevitable. Change is inevitable and constant. So learning to flex, this is true for women, by the way, as well.
Right.
Learning to be flexible, learning to be in a place where you can jump in a moment's notice, that you haven't created a life that is so rigid that your life would depend on it if you had to get out of it. Make ways so that things are more flexible, that you can move more easily, flow with things instead of rigidly meeting them with your intellect. If you keep going with things in your intellect all your life, the rigidity will continue to thrive there. When you start to go from your gut, your feeling place in your heart, where you listen and ask questions for yourself. There are so many places you can go to learn these things. The True Purpose Institute's one. I've been involved with them, taken many of their courses. Very valuable. Whatever you feel drawn to intuitively, know that there's truth in that for you. Don't ignore it. Don't override it with your intellect. I've seen so many people, if you ask them how they are, I see right away they're asking their intellect to say how their heart's feeling or how their body's feeling. Your heart is where it's coming from, but your intellect isn't going to tell you anything. Really, it's not about how you are. And it's not going to tell you how everything is. How everything is how you feel it. And I'm not saying just become an emotional blob. No, it's recognizing what the feelings are telling you. And there's such a wide array of feelings that we have, but we've only learned maybe 5 or 10 words to describe them. And therefore, our world is very limited by that vocabulary, the size of that vocabulary. Expand your world, expand your vocabulary and your experiences. Take advantage of new things, learn new things, grow yourself, and look at things that are not necessarily the way you think about life, but about other people's way of thinking too. And see what good there is in there. Look for it. Search for that. See what resonates for you. And if you're in a place where you don't feel good, leave it and don't waste time thinking about it and wondering what it could possibly be. That is your inner guidance telling you something that you haven't learned to listen to. The more you spend time paying attention to that, the better off you're going to find your life is. It's going to take you to whole new places, new people, new opportunities are going to show up for you. But you've got to get out of the rigidity of your thinking and being and flow with life.
Beautifully said, Riesah. Thank you so
Thank
much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end. We're just sort of winding down here. We have a few more minutes. If there's anybody out there who has any questions or comments for Riesah, we've been talking about the feminine and all over the place in terms of what the feminine is, how the feminine shows up, how the masculine has taken over the feminine, going back thousands of years, trying to control it, and pretty hard to do. The feminine isn't easily controlled, and what I'm hearing Riesah saying is that the things that are important in terms of from an organizational point of view and a humankind point of view is that we have to focus more on our hearts, more on compassion, more on developing relationships, more on listening to each other, more on trying new things, continuous learning, respecting other people's opinion, getting away from the competition, moving back or more towards cooperation, and that's the way we're going to get things done.
And being willing, excuse me, Herky, but
Yeah.
being willing to risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Being willing to risk for sure.
Yeah,
you'll want to tune in next week. Our next week's show is going to be the change. It's called Be the Change for Leaders, so that's going to be pretty cool. Paula she said what you said was beautiful. She thanks you for that. And then she has another question. Are there any characteristics or qualities you consider to be uniquely feminine?
Oh, well, oh, I have goosebumps all over me from that question, Paula. The first thing that comes to mind is
Mm.
the mystery of life. Um, Nature draws us in. And I can say, just from being in my garden, which is quite large, and being in it every day, I am drawn into the mystery of the life force that I experience and witness on every level. Now, that's just in my garden. Nature's everywhere. The mystery of life is definitely a feminine aspect in my world. Um, as to other ones that are
What about all
uniquely,
those male mystery writers that I read?
yeah. Well, there
Different
are
kind of
women who write
mystery.
mysteries too. There are women who write mysteries too, but there are mystics. Mystics. When you're looking for, I mean, as a child, I was drawn to fairies and elves. That's a very feminine aspect. Um, I still am. I'm still drawn to the unseen, but the sense that I have of it as it lives and abides all around me and in me is how I experience it. Um, it's beyond words. I think from the feminine perspective, words don't often do the job.
It's trying to put it in a box, like you were talking about at the beginning,
Yes,
right?
yes. The feminine is kind of an ineffable uh,
Paula
aspect.
said she loves fairies. She probably feeds them her pickles all the time.
So, that's what I would say. That's what really comes to mind, truly. I mean, compassion is something men and women both experience in life. Curiosity, too. Um, but it's how we approach it. The flow of energy is the feminine. When things are flowing unobstructed, that is the feminine. When it's obstructed, that's where the masculine has come in and kind of put a stop on path. Sometimes we do it ourselves. It could be the masculine part of ourselves. Our intellect drops it in. But it is the masculine, whether it's from a man or ourselves as a woman. But once we can keep flowing with life and surrender to it, surrender to it as a force that's much greater than we are, but that lives in us and everywhere in us. Once we surrender, those, all the beauty, all that is life kind of shows up in more color, more vibrant, more alive, and breathes through us. That to me is what is uniquely feminine.
Hmm.
That's what I experience.
Beautiful. Thank you, Paula. Thanks for being here again. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our time. And Riesah, I want to thank you so much for being here, for sharing your wisdom, sharing your heart, sharing my life. It's been a pleasure to have you, honey, and I'll see you real soon.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so
Herky, for
much
the
for coming.
opportunity. I love
Thank
you
you.
too.
Bye bye, honey.
Bye.
Well, folks, next week we are going to have a new episode called Be the Change. So you make sure that you want to tune in for that. Um, the show that we just had with Riesah Prock will be recorded. It is being recorded, and you'll be able to hear it on Leadership 2020 Facebook page whenever you want to. And I'll also be taking some excerpts from that show and posting them here and there so you can hear some more about Riesah and her website. Don't forget her website is in the description below if you want to find out more about her. And I'm also going to post a link to that grounding technique that I shared with you last week and also at the beginning of today's episode. Thank you so much for chiming in, folks, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll look forward to seeing you here again on Leadership 2020. I'm Herky Cutler. I've been your host. Have a fantastic day.